Leo stared at the final notice from the bank, his heart pounding violently against his chest. The numbers on the page blurred as tears filled his eyes. One last payment was overdue. Just one. But it was more money than he could ever manage. Even if he worked night shifts for a year straight, it wouldn't be enough. His small bakery in the heart of the city was already crippled by debt, and the lenders had warned him multiple times, pay, or risk losing everything. His wife, Clara, had just walked into the room, a hopeful smile on her face despite their struggles. "Any good news, Leo?" she asked, peering at him from across the living room. She wore a weary expression. She always did these days. But she still tried to see a silver lining in everything. It was one of the many reasons he'd married her. She was an eternal optimist, a gentle spirit who believed wholeheartedly in their marriage vows. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. Leo forced a grin, folding the notice and tucking it into his back pocket. "Not yet, but I have a lead." His voice trembled. Lying to her felt like swallowing shards of glass. But he couldn't bear to show her how cornered he felt. "I'm meeting a potential investor tonight." She walked over, laid a gentle hand on his shoulder, and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "I believe in you. We'll get through this," she whispered before heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner from their dwindling groceries. Little did she know that Leo had already reached out to several wealthy patrons in town, men rumored to have deep pockets and questionable business ethics. Among them was a mysterious billionaire named Victor Harrington, a man whispered about in hushed tones. Some said he was involved in real estate deals so massive they shaped entire skylines overnight. Others spoke of his philanthropic endeavors in small villages halfway across the world. But no one knew much about his personal life. He was a puzzle, and that was precisely what intrigued Leo. An hour later, Leo found himself standing outside an upscale lounge. Neon lights cast an eerie glow over the pavement, and people dressed in designer suits and expensive dresses brushed past him as they entered. His own suit was worn at the elbows, a fraying piece from a thrift store that he tried to keep in decent shape. He took a deep breath, stepped inside, and immediately felt the weight of wealth pressing in. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the ceiling. The bar was stocked with liquor he couldn't pronounce, and well-dressed servers balanced trays of cocktails that cost more than he earned in a day. Despite the elegance, Leo's insides churned with desperation. He approached a hostess who eyed him skeptically, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm here to meet Mr. Harrington," he managed, his voice shaky. She studied him for a moment, her gaze lingering on his rumpled sleeves. Then she gave a short nod. "Right this way." Through a semi-private area of the lounge, they arrived at a plush corner booth. Victor Harrington sat alone, sipping a whiskey on the rocks. Tall and lean, he had the kind of presence that commanded silence. His suit, perfectly tailored, hinted at broader shoulders than Leo had imagined, and streaks of silver in his dark hair only added to his air of authority. Leo swallowed hard and took a seat. Neither man spoke for a few seconds. Leo's heart thundered. He felt like a mouse in front of a cat, hoping not to be devoured. Finally, Victor broke the silence. "Leo Parker," he said, as though tasting the name. "I've looked into you a bit. You have a bakery, yes? And you're drowning in debt." The blunt words pricked Leo's pride, but he kept his composure. "Yes, Mr. Harrington. I was hoping we could strike a business deal. I just need a loan, something to help me get back on my feet." Victor set his glass down gently, the clink of ice echoing in the hush. "There are plenty of banks for that, or private lenders who thrive on such requests." "Why me?" Leo hesitated. The truth felt pathetic. He'd been turned down by every bank, and the private lenders wanted interest rates that would break him for life. He needed a miracle, not just a loan. "I'm looking for an unconventional arrangement," he said. Victor's eyes flickered with curiosity. "Go on." Over the course of an hour, Leo spilled the bleak state of his finances. In some twisted part of his mind, he clung to the rumor that Victor was known for making unusual bargains, often ones that made no sense to outsiders, but seemed to amuse or intrigue him. If there was a man in this city who might make a Faustian pact with him, it would be Victor Harrington. When Leo finally fell silent, Victor leaned back. You say you're desperate, Mr. Parker. Desperation makes men do unspeakable things. A chill ran down Leo's spine. He took a breath. I'm aware. I need help. Victor's tone remained calm. You have a wife, correct? Leo froze, uncertain how Victor knew that piece of information, but suspecting it was no great surprise. A man of Victor's resources could discover anything in minutes. Yes, Clara. She's everything to me. Victor's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. I see, he murmured, tapping his glass. He stared at the swirling amber liquid as though lost in thought, then fixed Leo with an appraising gaze. How far would you go to ensure her comfort and your own freedom from debt? Would you do anything? Leo felt his mouth go dry. He nodded, though inwardly. He didn't want to speak the words. Anything, he croaked. Victor's next words were softly spoken, yet they resounded like a thunderclap in Leo's mind. Would you let her stay with me for 1 year in exchange for financial security beyond your wildest dreams? Stunned silence. Leo's heart pounded so loudly, he was sure Victor could hear it. This was madness, something unthinkable. Yet a part of him, dark and desperate, considered it. 1 year. 1 year in exchange for wealth that could change their lives forever. He forced himself to remain calm. You want me to give you my wife? He asked, his voice faint. Victor shook his head with slow deliberation. Not give. It's an arrangement. She will be cared for, protected, never harmed. You'll receive a payment that will cover all your debts and more. After 1 year, if she wishes to return to you, she can. The words hung in the air, an appalling proposition. Leo felt sick to his stomach, but behind his nausea was a flicker of temptation, an escape from the crushing weight of financial ruin. He swallowed hard. I need to think. Victor nodded, rising to leave. By all means, do. But think quickly. Opportunities like this don't last forever. In the following days, Leo wrestled with guilt, shame, and a flickering sense of greed he couldn't control. Each time a new bill arrived, or he watched Clara skip lunch so he could eat, his resolve weakened. He told himself it would just be a temporary arrangement, a bizarre but life-altering chance to finally live free from poverty. Late one night, he picked up his phone and dialed Victor's number. When the billionaire's smooth voice answered, Leo closed his eyes and uttered the words that would change his life forever. I'll do it. Clara wiped her hands on a threadbare dish towel, staring at the modest dinner she prepared, a small bowl of soup and some bread. They were running out of groceries again. Still, she forced a smile as she carried the dishes to the table, determined to keep Leo's spirits up. She knew he'd been meeting people, making calls, trying to secure funds. She believed in him. She always had. Even though a nagging dread in the pit of her stomach warned that something was wrong, she pushed it aside, trusting her husband with all her heart. That evening, Leo came home flushed, an odd mix of anxiety and triumph dancing in his eyes. He barely touched the soup, mumbling vague answers when Clara asked how his meeting had gone. Finally, after dinner, he cleared his throat. Clara, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. I found a way out of our troubles. Her face lit up. That's wonderful news. Who's helping us? A bank? A private investor? He licked his lips, wishing he could bury the truth. It's the private investor, yes. His name is Victor Harrington. She recognized the name immediately. Everyone in the city had heard of him in some capacity. Victor Harrington, she echoed, her brow furrowing. What does he want in return? Leo hesitated. He'd spent hours rehearsing the conversation in his mind, planning how he would spin the deal. He couldn't just blurt out that he'd signed legally binding documents allowing her to stay with Victor for a year in exchange for millions. He wants you to, he wants you to live in his home for a while. The color drained from her face. He wants me. Leo forced a reassuring smile, though it came off more as a grimace. Just temporarily. He's lonely, Clara. He needs a companion, someone with empathy and kindness, someone like you. He'll pay handsomely, enough to cover all our debts and give us a future. She stared at him, confusion and betrayal beginning to stir within her. Live in his home. For how long? Leo's voice wavered. 1 year. After that, You can come back, and we'll be set for life. No more worrying about bills. No more working ourselves to the bone." Clara was silent, her thoughts churning. She stood abruptly and paced the small living room, hugging herself protectively. "You're talking about me leaving my home, our home, for a year to live with a complete stranger. This is insane." Leo rose too, gently taking her hands in his. "I know it sounds mad, but think of the alternative. We're losing everything, Clara. We might end up on the streets if we don't do something drastic." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Why can't you just ask him for a simpler deal? A loan. Or maybe a partnership in the bakery. Anything but this." A pang of guilt struck Leo. He couldn't tell her that Victor had been explicit. The arrangement was all or nothing. There was no partial measure. Worse yet, Leo had already taken the money. The contract was signed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, trembling slightly. "Look, it's all right here," he whispered. "It's enough to pay off everything we owe, plus enough left over to start a new business or even move to a better neighborhood when you come back." He tried to smile. "We'll finally be free, Clara. We'll have a new beginning." The sight of that check made her stomach churn. You already accepted it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You took his money before talking to me." Leo nodded, shame burning his cheeks. "I had to secure the deal, or he would have moved on." She snatched the check, tears streaming down her face. The number was astronomical. Her heart twisted in confusion and dread. "Do I even get a say in this?" Leo was silent, and in that silence, Clara felt the cruel truth sink in. Her husband had effectively sold her to another man. Her heartbreak and disbelief gave way to numbness. She couldn't scream, though she wanted to. She just sank onto the sofa and stared at the check, her tears splashing onto the paper. Leo knelt in front of her, reaching for her hand. "Clara, I'm sorry. I did this for us. For our future. He won't hurt you. I promise." She pulled her hand away, trembling. "We don't even know him. And you did this behind my back." She closed her eyes, trying to gather her scattered emotions. "You've betrayed me, Leo." His chest constricted at her words. "It's just a year," he repeated, as though trying to convince himself. "We can survive a year if it means never worrying about money again." In the days that followed, Clara wrestled with the unthinkable. Part of her wanted to tear the contract into pieces, to take her suitcase and run. But where could she go? Without the money, they would be homeless. She still cared for Leo despite his unforgivable actions, and she couldn't stomach the thought of him going to jail for defaulting on debts. Moreover, Leo assured her that if she violated the agreement, the penalties would be immense. Victor's lawyers had seen to that. At last, Clara resigned herself to a devastating acceptance. If this was the only way to save them, she would do it. But every time she looked at Leo, all she could see was the betrayal. A week later, a luxurious black limousine pulled up in front of their cramped apartment complex. The neighbors gawked as the chauffeur stepped out, nodding politely at Clara as he took her bags. She stood at the curb with tears in her eyes, still half hoping this was a terrible nightmare. Leo was by her side, but she refused to meet his gaze. When the car door opened, Clara hesitated, glancing back at the life she was leaving behind. Even though it was small and full of financial woes, it was her home. And yet, here she was, forced into an arrangement she despised. Finally, she stepped into the limousine, and the door shut with a solid click. As the car pulled away, she watched Leo become a speck in the rearview window. The man she once trusted more than anyone in the world, now someone she barely recognized. Thus began the journey that would change Clara's life forever, and leave Leo wondering if he'd just made the worst decision of his life. The limousine glided through the city streets, headed toward a part of town Clara had never visited. The buildings grew taller, the neighborhoods more exclusive, until they passed ornate gates that opened onto a winding driveway lined with manicured trees. At the end of this driveway stood Victor Harrington's mansion, a majestic structure of white stone, flanked by marble pillars and surrounded by lush gardens. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She felt small, out of place, as the chauffeur opened her door and escorted her inside. The foyer alone was larger than her entire apartment, with a sweeping staircase and a chandelier that sparkled like a cluster of diamonds. A prim woman in a crisp uniform approached, introducing herself as Mrs. Evans, the head housekeeper. "Welcome, Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice polite but distant. "Mr. Harrington is expecting you. Let me take you to your room." In a daze, Clara followed her up the grand staircase, down a corridor adorned with priceless paintings and sculptures. Finally, they stopped at a door, which Mrs. Evans opened with a small bow. The suite inside was breathtaking: a large canopied bed, elegant drapes, and a balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens. "I'll leave you to settle in," Mrs. Evans said. "Dinner will be served at 8. Mr. Harrington has asked that you join him in the dining room." Alone, Clara walked around the suite, touching the silk sheets, running her hand along the polished wood of the vanity. It all felt so surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. The oppressive sense of being traded, of no longer being in control of her own fate, weighed heavily on her chest. She sat down on a velvet armchair and stared out the balcony doors. Where was Leo now? Was he basking in his newfound wealth, or wrestling with guilt? She pushed the thoughts away, knowing that either possibility would only bring her pain. Hours later, she gathered her courage and made her way to the dining room. Standing at the entrance, she swallowed back her nerves. The room was just as lavish as the foyer, with a long mahogany table set for two. At the far end sat Victor, dressed in a tailored dinner jacket. He rose when he saw her, walking over with a reserved smile. "Clara," he greeted her, his tone almost gentle. "Thank you for joining me." Her voice trembled as she replied, "I didn't think I had much of a choice." He nodded slowly, acknowledging her words without argument. "Please have a seat." Servants brought out dish after dish of exquisite cuisine: lobster bisque, filet mignon, roasted vegetables drizzled with rare sauces. Normally, Clara would have been awed by the spread, but her appetite was non-existent. She picked at her food, feeling Victor's gaze on her. Finally, he spoke, breaking the tense silence. "I'm not here to torture you, Clara. I realize this situation is unusual." She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. They were dark and guarded, revealing little of the man behind them. "Unusual," she echoed bitterly. "That's one way to put it. My husband just handed me over," as if her voice cracked, and she lowered her eyes. Victor's expression shifted ever so slightly. "He's a desperate man. I've seen desperation drive people to extremes. I'm not here to justify it." Clara took a shaky breath. "Why did you want me here?" The question had burned in her mind ever since she heard about this arrangement. "What do you gain from this?" He set his fork down, regarding her carefully. "Loneliness can make a man do strange things. I don't have any illusions about what your husband agreed to, but I have my reasons, ones that you may or may not come to understand in time." His cryptic response offered no solace. She glanced at the grand surroundings. "I'd rather stay in my tiny apartment with my husband than live in the richest mansion feeling like an object," she whispered, bitterness creeping into her voice. Victor stiffened slightly, then spoke in a measured tone. "You are not an object, Clara. I will provide for you and keep you safe. That much I can promise." He paused, weighing his words. "I'm not here to force myself on you. You'll have your own space, your own life within these walls. But for 1 year, you will remain here." She swallowed, noting his emphasis on that final sentence. It felt like a command. Anger and despair flared within her. "And then, in a year, I can just walk away, free as a bird." He hesitated. "If that is truly what you want, then yes." Despite the swirl of emotions, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. "Why 1 year?" Victor's jaw tightened. After a moment, he offered, "Let's just say it's a time frame I've chosen for personal reasons." No further explanation was forthcoming, and an awkward silence fell over them. Clara's appetite had vanished. She set down her utensils. "I'd like to go to my room now." He dipped his head in a curt nod, a faint expression of something regret flashing over his features. "Mrs. Evans will show you the way." Clara stood, her shoulders bowed under the weight of her predicament. In the hallway, Mrs. Evans was waiting, her posture perfectly straight, her expression inscrutable. Silently, she led Clara back to the suite. That night, Clara lay awake on satin sheets, haunted by thoughts of Leo and the sickening notion that she'd been purchased. No matter how gently Victor treated her, the truth remained. She belonged to him now, contractually bound to stay by his side for a year. Yet beneath her fury and heartbreak, a question lingered. What kind of man would offer such a deal? And why did he, of all people, value her presence so highly? She had a feeling that behind Victor's steely composure lay a deeper story. But would she ever discover it? Or would she spend the year as a glorified prisoner in a gilded cage, never truly knowing the man who held her captive? Every morning, Clara woke to the soft chime of a clock in her suite. She would shower in a lavish marble bathroom, dress in the designer clothes Mrs. Evans procured for her, and then wander the mansion's corridors in aimless exploration. The estate was a labyrinth. Countless rooms, hidden passages, a sunroom filled with exotic plants. A small library on the second floor drew her in with its antique volumes and quiet serenity. Despite the mansion's opulence, Clara felt like a bird in a gilded cage. She had everything she could want, except freedom. Each time she tried to step out to the garden or beyond, a security guard appeared, polite but firm in his instructions to remain within designated areas. She missed the hustle and bustle of her old life, the noise of the bakery at dawn, the friendly banter with customers. She missed waking up next to Leo, even though anger and betrayal still coursed through her veins whenever she thought of him. Victor remained an enigma. Some days, she saw him at breakfast, where he would greet her politely but maintain a distance. Other days, she didn't see him at all, and Mrs. Evans would inform her that he was traveling for business. In the evenings, he sometimes invited her to dinner, but their conversation remained superficial. Discussions about the city, the weather, or upcoming events. One afternoon, bored and lonely, Clara ventured into the library. She ran her fingers along the rows of books until one title caught her eye, Reflections on the Human Condition. Pulling it out, she noticed it had a worn cover and scribbled notes in the margins. It looked well read and loved. Intrigued, she opened it to a page with a small scrap of paper tucked inside. In neat handwriting, she saw a quote highlighted. "We are all searching for something, but sometimes what we find is not what we expected." A voice behind her made her jump. That was my mother's favorite book. She spun around to find Victor standing in the doorway, his posture relaxed but his gaze piercing. Flustered, she closed the book. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." He shook his head. "It's no intrusion. You're free to read whatever you like." He walked over, eyes lingering on the worn cover. "She read it to me when I was a child, always telling me that the best things in life are rarely what we think we want initially." Clara studied his face, detecting a rare hint of vulnerability. "Your mother, is she still around?" His expression clouded. "She passed away years ago. Cancer." The single word carried a weight of old pain. Sympathy washed over Clara. "I'm sorry. That must have been hard." A muscle worked in his jaw. It was. After a moment, he stepped back, as though withdrawing behind the fortress of his composure. "What about you? You mentioned your parents are gone as well." Clara nodded, hugging the book against her chest. "They died in a car accident when I was in college. It was just me and Leo after that." Mentioning Leo still tore at her heart, the conflicting swirl of love and betrayal roiling inside her. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Then Victor cleared his throat. "I realize this situation is not easy for you, Clara. I want you to know that I don't expect anything more than your presence here. You're free to spend your days as you wish." She forced a brittle smile. "Yes, as I wish, within these walls." He sighed, nodding once. "Within these walls, for now." Then, turning on his heel, he left her there in the quiet library, the walls closing in once again. A few weeks later, a grand charity event took place at the mansion, offering Clara a glimpse into Victor's public persona. Dozens of wealthy individuals arrived in sleek cars, mingling in the foyer and out on the expansive lawn. Soft jazz played, waiters passed around champagne flutes, and cameras flashed as a local news crew covered the event. Clara found herself near the edge of the crowd, dressed in a shimmering gown Victor's stylist had selected. She felt out of place amid the glittering throng, but she tried to smile politely and answer curious questions from attendees who recognized her as Victor's new companion. A society columnist cornered her by the fountain, peppering her with inquiries. "How long have you known Mr. Harrington? Is there a wedding in the works? Does he plan to invest in a new philanthropic venture?" Clara struggled to maintain composure, offering vague answers. The reality, that she was a woman essentially sold into a year-long contract, would shatter this glitzy facade. Soon, she felt a comforting hand on her elbow. Victor had appeared, smoothly inserting himself into the conversation. "Mrs. Parker is assisting me with various charitable initiatives," he said, flashing the reporter a practiced smile that revealed nothing. "She's been instrumental in guiding my philanthropic choices." Clara wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but she only managed a tense smile. The columnist seemed satisfied enough to continue hounding other guests. As the night wore on, Clara noticed Victor skillfully networking, signing hefty checks for the charity, shaking hands, and offering polite laughter at half-hearted jokes from the city's elite. On the surface, he seemed the perfect billionaire philanthropist, generous, poised, and gracious. Yet each time she caught a glimpse of his eyes, she saw a man distant from the merriment, as though he stood behind an invisible barrier that no one else noticed. His social interactions were polished but hollow, like an actor performing a scripted role. Late in the evening, Clara wandered onto a terrace overlooking the gardens, seeking a moment of solitude. The air was cooler, scented by night-blooming flowers. She rested her hands on the balustrade and gazed into the dark expanse. Victor's voice drifted from behind her, low and quiet. "Tired of the party?" She turned to see him, standing in the doorway, jacket draped over one arm, tie slightly loosened. "I'm not really used to all this," she admitted, gesturing at the grand spectacle behind them. "It feels fake." He came to stand beside her, his gaze on the shimmering lights below. "It is," he said simply. "Networking, handshakes, forced smiles. It's all part of the performance." She studied his profile. "Then why do you host these events?" His lips twisted into a half-smile. "To keep up appearances, to maintain influence, to do a few good deeds along the way. Some of the money raised tonight genuinely helps people, and that matters, even if the process is wrapped in superficialities." Clara considered this. "I suppose you have your reasons." He turned toward her then, meeting her eyes. "We all have reasons for what we do." She felt a pang in her chest, thinking of Leo's reasons: money, desperation, fear. She turned away, trying to steady herself against the swirl of conflicting emotions. "I just wish I understood yours," she murmured. His gaze flicked downward. "Perhaps, in time, you will." A hush fell between them, a subtle tension that felt both uncomfortable and oddly comforting. In that moment, Clara saw a flicker of something human beneath his aloof exterior. It was a fragile glimpse, gone as quickly as it appeared when he excused himself to return to his guests. Alone again, Clara inhaled the cool night air. This life of gold, mansions, gowns, lavish parties, might look like a dream, but the walls felt colder than ever. Victor Harrington, for all his wealth, seemed a man hollowed out by something in his past. And she, for all her moral righteousness, was here on a contract, bound by the decisions of a husband who had betrayed her. Some nights, before she fell asleep, she'd pray for the year to pass quickly. Yet a tiny voice whispered that a transformation was already taking shape, one neither she nor Victor had planned. And while this life gleamed like gold, it hid hearts scarred by pain and choices that could never be undone. Meanwhile, across the city, Leo's life was spinning wildly out of control. At first, the influx of money felt like an incredible rush. His debts, cleared in a single transaction. The bakery, paid off in full. Overnight, he went from living in terror of debt collectors to holding a bank balance that dwarfed anything he'd ever imagined. His first move was to buy a sleek car he'd always coveted. He treated friends, acquaintances, really, to lavish dinners, picking up the tab without a second thought. When he walked into high-end nightclubs, he was treated like a VIP, bottles of expensive champagne lining his table. And yet, as the novelty wore off, a gnawing guilt sank its teeth into his soul. Late at night, when the music had faded and the people he called friends had gone home, he would lie awake in his newly furnished apartment, staring at the ceiling. He imagined Clara alone in an unfamiliar mansion, possibly under the watchful eye of a man he didn't truly know. He recalled the haunted look on her face the day she left, how she refused to meet his gaze. What had he done? In the mornings, he tried to shove aside the remorse by burying himself in more indulgences. He redecorated the bakery with expensive equipment and hired extra staff. But he hardly worked anymore, preferring to spend his afternoons gambling at upscale casinos with the new crowd he'd fallen in with, people who marveled at his sudden fortune and never asked how he'd gotten it. One afternoon, as he sat at a private poker table, he found himself $10,000 down in a single hand. A friend, Tristan, a smooth-talking real estate heir, leaned over. "You gonna let them take your money like that, Parker?" Leo glanced at his cards, the numbers a blur. Clara's face flickered in his mind, her soft eyes pleading for answers he hadn't given. Despite his guilt, he shoved more chips into the center of the table. He couldn't lose. He wouldn't. He lost anyway, spectacularly. The short drive back to his apartment felt like a trip to the underworld. Guilt wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket, mixed with anger at the world, at himself. Stepping inside, he flicked on the lights, revealing a lavishly decorated living room he had once dreamed of. Now it felt sterile and empty. Alone with his thoughts, he sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. He told himself this was temporary, that once Clara returned, they could rebuild. Yet the memory of her tear-streaked face tormented him. Did she despise him? Would she ever forgive him? In a burst of desperation, he grabbed his phone and called the only number he had for Victor Harrington's mansion. A polite but unwavering staff member answered. "Mr. Parker," the woman said, her tone neutral. "I'm afraid Mrs. Parker is not available to come to the phone." He clenched the phone tighter. "She's my wife." "Put her on," he demanded, voice edged with panic. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Harrington has instructed us to allow no unsupervised contact. If you have any inquiries, please speak directly with Mr. Harrington's attorney." Leo's temper flared, and he almost screamed into the phone. But before he could say another word, the line went dead, hurling the device across the room. He listened to it crack against the wall. The days that followed were a blur of parties and casino trips. Yet each night ended the same, a dismal emptiness that gnawed at his insides. The so-called friends he tried to impress with his wealth vanished the moment he stopped paying for their fun. As he sank deeper into reckless behavior, he realized how alone he truly was. One stormy evening, after losing a large sum at a blackjack table, Leo staggered outside. Rain pelted him, soaking his expensive suit as he stood under the neon lights of the casino entrance. He had nowhere to go, no one he trusted, no comfort to cling to. In that moment, he recalled the warmth of the cramped apartment he once shared with Clara, the gentle way she'd stroke his hair when he was stressed, her unwavering faith in his ability to make things right. He whispered her name, tears mixing with the rain. "Clara, I'm so sorry." Thunder rumbled in the distance as he trudged aimlessly down the empty street. For all the money in his accounts, he couldn't buy back the peace he once had. He felt like he'd traded his soul for riches that were worthless without her. And in the midst of the swirling storm, it struck him with brutal clarity. He had condemned the woman he loved to a stranger's mercy, possibly destroying their marriage, and perhaps even Clara herself in the process. Regret hit him like a tidal wave, threatening to pull him under. But he doubted he'd ever find redemption if he couldn't find a way to fix what he had broken. Back at the mansion, Clara's days grew more patterned. She would rise early, stroll the lush gardens under the watchful eyes of discreet security, then retreat to her suite or the library. Sometimes she filled the hours reading or practicing piano in a small music room, discovering to her surprise that the instrument brought her a sense of calm in this alien environment. Victor remained a distant figure much of the time. He traveled frequently, attending to business in other cities. But when he was home, Clara noticed a subtle shift in his behavior. He asked about her day, offered recommendations for books, and even once joined her in the music room, quietly listening as she practiced a simple melody. One evening, Clara sat in the drawing room, flipping through a magazine, when Victor entered. He wore a casual sweater instead of his usual suit, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. He gestured to the seat across from her. "May I?" She nodded, surprised. He settled down, resting his arms on his knees. For a moment, neither spoke, the ticking of a nearby clock filling the silence. "Mrs. Evans told me you've been spending time in the music room," he finally said. "I didn't know you played the piano." Clara shrugged. "I'm not very good, but it helps pass the time." Victor considered her words, then offered a small smile. "Perhaps I can listen to you sometime. My mother was fond of the piano. She always believed music could heal the parts of us we keep hidden." A pang of empathy struck Clara. She could tell from his tone that this mention of his mother carried deep significance. Deciding to gently broach the subject, she asked, "You mentioned she read you those books as a child. Was your father around as well?" Victor's expression grew guarded, a shadow crossing his features. "My father left when I was young. He and my mother never saw eye to eye. He believed in business at any cost. She believed in compassion. Their parting wasn't amicable." Clara sensed the pain beneath his clipped words. "I'm sorry," she said, meeting his gaze. "It sounds like she tried her best to raise you alone." He nodded, a tightness at the corners of his mouth. "She did. She worked multiple jobs, eventually saving enough to open a small counseling practice. She was a therapist, one of the kindest souls I've known. When she got sick, I dropped out of college to take care of her. After she passed, I inherited a small sum of money and set out to prove something. To the world, to my absent father, to myself. I wanted to become a man of power and influence, so I'd never feel helpless again." His tone was matter-of-fact, but the intensity in his eyes belied deeper emotions. Clara leaned forward, her voice soft with understanding. "That must have been a lot to carry alone. And you succeeded, clearly. You have more power and influence than most people could dream of." He let out a humorless chuckle. "At a cost. Sometimes I question what I've sacrificed along the way." Silence fell between them. Clara felt a tug at her heart, an unexpected compassion for this man who had effectively bought her for a year. She realized that while she despised the situation, Victor was not the monster she'd envisioned. He was a man molded by loss and a desperate need for control, much like Leo had been driven by desperation for financial security. She ventured a gentle question. "And why me? You could have anyone, so why bring me here under such circumstances?" Victor looked away, his jaw tightening. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "When your husband approached me, he reminded me of someone cornered by fate, the way my mother once was. Desperate men do desperate things, and I wanted to see if it was possible for something good to come out of an impossible situation." He hesitated, then admitted, "I didn't plan on you being so real." Her heart pounded at his words. She swallowed, uncertain how to respond. Before she could find the right words, he stood, the moment of vulnerability passing as quickly as it arrived. "I'm going to call it a night," he said, his voice returning to its formal timbre. "Good evening, Clara." With that, he left, leaving her alone in the drawing room, her thoughts swirling. Could she truly despise a man who carried such hidden wounds? And why did she feel her defenses cracking when it came to Victor's quiet confessions? A few days later, Clara sat at the piano, playing a simple tune. She tried to lose herself in the melody, but her mind wandered to Victor's revelations, Leo's betrayal, and the hollow ache inside her chest. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw Victor standing there, a mixture of curiosity and warmth in his eyes. "Don't stop," he said softly. She swallowed her nerves and continued, the gentle notes filling the air. When she finished, he offered a subdued smile. "You played beautifully." "Thank you." Heat rose to her cheeks. "I'm still learning. It's nothing special." He shook his head. "It's more than special. It's honest." They lapsed into silence, the tension palpable. Clara found herself wishing she could see behind the guarded walls in his gaze. Hesitantly, she asked, "Would you like me to teach you a short piece? Something simple?" Victor's surprise was evident. He gave a faint nod, and she scooted over on the bench to make room for him. He sat beside her, the closeness making her pulse flutter unexpectedly. "Place your right hand here," she instructed, guiding his fingers onto the keys. The contact sent a small jolt through her. Carefully, she demonstrated a basic melody. Victor's first attempt was stiff, the notes uneven. She covered his hand with hers, adjusting his fingers gently. He turned to look at her, and for a brief moment their eyes locked. Clara could feel the warmth of his body, his breath catching as he realized their proximity. They stumbled through the rest of the song, both acutely aware of each other. When they finally let the final chord ring out, Victor drew his hand back, something akin to gratitude and unease mingling in his expression. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I'd appreciate your patience." She nodded, her own emotions swirling. The tension lingered, crackling in the air. Here was the man who controlled her fate, but in this small moment at the piano, they were just two people sharing something vulnerable. Over the next few weeks, small interactions like this became their norm. They exchanged polite conversation over breakfast, sometimes took walks in the gardens where they discussed art, literature, or random trivia. Victor occasionally joined her at the piano, faltering through notes while Clara encouraged him. The mansion began to feel less like a prison, though freedom still hung just out of reach. Every so often, Clara's thoughts drifted back to Leo. Anger flared whenever she recalled his betrayal, but so did concern. Was he all right? Was he using the money to build a better life? Or was he lost without her? Despite everything, she still cared about him in ways that tore at her conscience. She was technically still his wife, bound by vows that seemed hollow now. Yet as days turned into weeks, she found her gaze lingering on Victor longer than she intended. She noticed the small acts of kindness he showed, from refilling her teacup to listening intently when she spoke of her dreams. She grew attuned to his mood shifts, sensing when business calls weighed on him or when an old memory stirred a latent sadness. In ways neither of them anticipated, a fragile connection began to blossom. It was marked by tentative smiles and gentle conversations, a slow thaw of the ice that had once separated them. Neither dared to speak openly of what was happening, but each day, the lines between captive and captor blurred a little more, replaced by something that neither had bargained for, and yet couldn't deny. Clara rushed to the bathroom one morning, her stomach rolling with nausea. She barely made it to the toilet before retching. The violent heaving left her breathless and shaking, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. As she leaned against the bathroom wall, a terrible thought forced its way to the forefront of her mind. Could she be pregnant? Her hands trembled as she recalled the last few weeks, the times she had felt unusually fatigued, the dizzy spells in the afternoons. A wave of conflicting emotions surged through her, fear, confusion, and an undercurrent of quiet hope she dared not acknowledge. She closed her eyes, remembering her last intimate moment with Leo, before he had arranged this nightmare. It had been just over a month ago, a desperate act of comfort in their financially troubled world. But the math was adding up. Unable to bear the uncertainty, she sent Mrs. Evans out for a pregnancy test. An hour later, Clara stood in her suite's bathroom, staring at the test strip in her shaking hands. 2 lines. Positive. Her mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of it. A child, a baby growing inside her. Tears blurred her vision. The father could only be Leo, yet she was now living in Victor's mansion. What did this mean for her future? For the baby's future? She cried for a long time, overwhelmed by a tangle of emotions. Finally, steadying herself, she realized she needed to tell Victor. No matter how complicated the situation, he deserved to know. This would affect their arrangement. She found him in his study, a massive room lined with shelves of leather-bound books. He looked up from his desk when she entered, his brow furrowing in concern at her pale face. "Clara," his tone was gentle. "What's wrong?" She forced her feet to move closer, clutching the positive test in her hand like a lifeline. Her heart hammered, threatening to drown out her voice. I'm pregnant, she managed. Victor's eyes widened, surprise and something else flickering across his face, shock perhaps. Slowly, he rose from his chair, stepping around the desk. Pregnant, he repeated. His gaze fell on the test in her hand, then back to her face. Are you sure? Clara nodded, tears threatening again. I took a test. It's positive. And the timing means Leo is the father. He exhaled softly, his expression morphing into something she couldn't decipher. Was it regret? Pain? Concern? Clara, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know this must be overwhelming. She let out a choked laugh, tears rolling down her cheeks. That's an understatement. I'm stuck in this arrangement for the rest of the year, with a child on the way. Leo doesn't even know. Victor's voice was steady, but laced with compassion. We'll handle this together. You and the baby will be cared for. Whatever you need, doctors, nutritionists, anything. It's yours. His immediate acceptance surprised her. She had half expected anger or frustration, but she should have known better. For all his flaws, Victor had never shown cruelty toward her. Her tears flowed more freely now. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to run back and tell Leo. But then I remember, he sold me. Victor's jaw tightened at the reminder, but his voice remained composed. That doesn't change the fact that he's the father. Do you want me to contact him? She hesitated, hugging herself protectively. I'm not sure. A part of me hates him for what he did, but he has a right to know, doesn't he? Victor studied her face, seeming to weigh his response carefully. Yes, he does. But you also have the right to protect yourself. If you want me to arrange a meeting, I will. If not, that's your decision. Clara wiped her eyes, exhausted from the turmoil. Could you just give me some time to think? Of course, he said softly. Then he guided her to a chair and knelt in front of her, eyes filled with an earnest concern that caught her off guard. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you and the baby are safe and healthy. You're not alone in this, Clara. Not anymore. She swallowed hard, gratitude warring with the chaos inside her. Despite the painful circumstances, Victor's unwavering support brought her a flicker of comfort. Over the next few days, a flurry of medical appointments ensued. Victor insisted on the best prenatal care, and Clara found herself meeting a top obstetrician who confirmed the pregnancy. The doctor also recommended she minimize stress. Easier said than done, Clara thought wryly. Her entire life was stress personified. Nevertheless, Victor hovered protectively, ensuring she had everything she needed. He even quietly rearranged his travel schedule, opting to conduct some meetings remotely so he could remain nearby. Their daily routines shifted. Clara spent more time resting, and Victor spent more time checking in on her. The staff seemed to sense the change too, going out of their way to provide comfort and convenience. One evening, Clara curled up on a plush sofa, sipping herbal tea. Victor entered the room cautiously, holding a small wrapped package. I got something for you, he said, offering it to her with a tentative smile. She opened the gift, discovering a classic children's book inside. Guess how much I love you. Clara's throat tightened. She remembered her own mother reading that to her when she was a child. Thank you, she whispered, hugging the book to her chest. Victor settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. My mother used to read that to me. I thought maybe you could read it to your child someday. A tear slipped from her eye. That's very thoughtful, she managed, overcome by the unexpected sweetness of the gesture. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the tension of their past dynamic replaced by a fragile closeness. Clara felt her heart soften further toward Victor, though confusion still gnawed at her. She carried Leo's child, but her husband had all but abandoned her. And here was Victor, providing the kind of support she'd always hoped to receive from Leo. Yet the question remained, how long could this fragile bubble of support last? Leo would eventually learn about the pregnancy, and the complexities of their arrangement would come crashing down around them. For now, Clara let herself drift in the quiet, uncertain peace, the baby's future already reshaping everything she once thought she knew. While Clara's life found a semblance of stability, Leo's spiraled further into chaos. After losing most of his fortune at the casino, he realized with grim clarity just how fleeting and hollow his newfound wealth had been. His so-called friends vanished the moment he stopped paying for their drinks and placing high-stakes bets. One late night, he stumbled home to his apartment, barely furnished now, as he'd sold off some of the lavish pieces to cover gambling debts. The air inside felt stale, a grim reminder of his downfall. Collapsing onto a battered couch, he stared at the ceiling, tears of shame burning his eyes. He'd spent a lifetime yearning for financial security, yet when he finally attained it by sacrificing Clara, it had slipped through his fingers like sand. He tried calling the mansion again, but the same polite staff member informed him that Clara was unavailable. The next day, he stormed up to the tall iron gates of Victor Harrington's estate, only to be stopped by stoic security guards who refused to let him pass. "Tell Clara I'm here," he shouted, fists pounding against the gate. His voice cracked with desperation. "She's my wife. She needs to see me." The guards remained stone-faced, ignoring his pleas. Eventually, they threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. Defeated, he turned away, tears stinging his eyes. The thought of Clara living in that mansion without him, growing further out of reach, tormented him. Over the following weeks, his anger and obsession grew, fueled by guilt and regret. He tried reaching Victor personally, calling every number he could find, even showing up at corporate offices, only to be met with a security detail who had clearly been warned about him. Desperate and paranoid, Leo hired a private investigator to track down any information about Clara's well-being. The reports he received only deepened his turmoil. Clara was healthy, apparently content, living in luxury at the mansion. Worse, rumors circulated that she and Victor were spending more time together, that she looked happier than ever. These updates gnawed at Leo's already fragile psyche. He convinced himself that Clara was being manipulated or coerced, that Victor had brainwashed her into staying. The possibility that she might be genuinely moving on from his betrayal was too painful to accept. Finally, one fateful day, the private investigator reported that Clara was pregnant. The news hit Leo like a sledgehammer to the chest. He stumbled into a nearby alley, doubling over as bile rose in his throat. She was carrying his child, a child he'd unwittingly abandoned by forcing Clara into this arrangement. Rage flared, fueling his determination. He wouldn't let Victor keep his wife and his unborn child. He had to see her, had to make this right. Even if Clara hated him, she needed to know he could change. In a haze of desperation, he started plotting how to confront Victor Harrington one final time. Days later, Leo parked his battered car on a side street near the mansion, waiting until dusk. As darkness fell, he slipped through a gap in the estate's perimeter fence, a reckless move. But he was beyond caring. The memory of Clara's gentle smile, the thought of his unborn child, spurred him on. He crouched behind hedges and creeping vines, inching closer to the grand building. Lights glowed in the windows. He imagined Clara inside, perhaps reading a book, unaware that he was mere yards away. Pressing himself against a wall, he scanned the area. Security cameras perched along the eaves, red lights blinking ominously. Suddenly, a bright beam of a flashlight sliced through the darkness. Leo held his breath, flattening himself behind a sculpted shrub. Two guards walked by, conversing in low tones. He waited, heart hammering, until they passed. Seizing the moment, he darted across a small courtyard, reaching the side of the house. He tried a door locked. Another, also locked. Anxiety surged. If the guards found him, he'd be arrested. But he had to see Clara. Finally, a small side door gave way. It was likely used by staff carrying supplies. He stepped inside, instantly overwhelmed by the opulence and the sense of being an intruder. The hallway was lined with artwork, and the rich smell of polished wood filled his nostrils. He heard voices nearby, a man and a woman. Following the sound, he inched closer, heart pounding. Rounding a corner, he glimpsed a partially opened door leading to a cozy sitting room. He froze at the sight inside. Clara sat on a plush sofa, one hand resting over what must be a slight baby bump. She looked radiant, her features softer and more at peace than he'd seen in ages. Victor knelt before her, gently placing a blanket over her legs. A sense of care emanated from him that made Leo's stomach churn with jealousy and regret. "I want you to stay warm," Victor said quietly. "The doctor said it's important for you to avoid chills." Clara smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Thank you, Victor. I'm feeling fine, really." Emotions tore through Leo. Anguish, rage, regret. He couldn't reconcile the radiant woman before him with the memory of her tear-streaked face on the day she left. Had she truly found comfort in Victor's presence? Unable to contain himself, Leo stepped into view. "Clara!" he shouted, voice hoarse, with pent-up emotion. Both Clara and Victor whipped their heads around, eyes widening. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Victor instantly rose, his demeanor switching to protectiveness. "Leo," Clara whispered, her face pale with shock. Leo stood there, breathing hard, tears of desperation in his eyes. "I need to talk to my wife." Victor moved to block his path, calm but firm. "You shouldn't be here, Parker. You're trespassing." Leo ignored him, fixing his gaze on Clara. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I know I messed up terribly, but I can't lose you, especially now that you're pregnant." Clara's lips trembled. "You found out?" He nodded, trying to step around Victor. "Yes, I should have been here for you from the beginning." Victor stood his ground. "Clara, do you want him here?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, tears shimmering in her eyes. Conflicting emotions crossed her face, residual love, deep hurt, and an undeniable sense of self-preservation. Finally, she spoke, her voice uneven. "He deserves a chance to talk." Victor gave her a solemn nod, stepping aside but remaining near, ready to intervene if necessary. Leo moved closer, carefully kneeling before Clara. He hesitated, then tried to take her hands in his, but she drew back. "Clara, please," he begged, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I've lost everything. The money, it's gone. None of it matters without you. I realize now how selfish I was, how I let my fear of poverty drive me to do something unthinkable. Please forgive me." She closed her eyes, tears seeping through her lashes. "You sold me, Leo. You signed papers behind my back. I can't just forget that." He bowed his head in shame. "I know, and I don't expect you to, but I'll do anything, to make it right. I just want you back, Clara. You and our child." Her gaze flickered toward Victor, who stood silently, his expression unreadable. Clara's heart pounded. She remembered the betrayal, the pain of being thrust into this arrangement. Yet she also recalled the struggles they endured together for years, the love that once bound them. "I'm not sure," she finally managed, her voice trembling. "So much has happened, Leo. I don't even recognize you anymore, and I'm not sure I recognize myself." Leo clasped his hands together, desperation etched on his features. "Let me prove that I've changed, that I can be the husband you deserve." She looked away, arms folded protectively over her abdomen. "You need to leave, Leo. I need time to think." He stared at her, anguish flickering in his eyes. At last he rose, glancing at Victor with undisguised animosity. Then, with slumped shoulders, he turned and walked out, escorted by security guards who had arrived to ensure he left the premises. As the door closed behind him, Clara felt her entire body shake. Victor rushed to her side, steadying her gently. "Are you all right?" She leaned into his touch, tears spilling onto his shoulder. I don't know," she whispered, the baby pressing gently inside her as a reminder that her choices would no longer affect just her life, but another's as well. The mansion felt heavy with tension in the days following Leo's unexpected visit. Clara wrestled with her emotions, torn between the lingering echoes of the life she once shared with Leo and the unexpected refuge she'd found with Victor. The knowledge that her child was Leo's weighed on her, complicating every thought. Victor tried to give her space, yet he remained supportive, ensuring she made her doctor's appointments, encouraging her to rest, and quietly leaving small gifts or notes to make her smile. She sensed his anxiety, though. A part of him feared she might return to Leo, even after everything that had happened. One afternoon, Clara found herself standing on the mansion's grand terrace, gazing at the meticulously trimmed hedges and bright flower beds. Her mind traveled back to her cramped apartment with Leo, where potted plants wilted on the windowsill because they couldn't afford proper sunlight or soil. She startled at the sound of footsteps. Turning, she saw Victor approaching. He hesitated, then gestured to the chair beside her. "May I sit?" She nodded, offering a small smile. Once seated, he paused before speaking. "I know this is difficult for you. I see how torn you are." Clara exhaled shakily. "I can't just pretend the past didn't happen. Leo was my husband for years. We endured so much together. Part of me still cares about him, in spite of everything." Victor dipped his head, acknowledging her words. "He's the father of your child. That bond doesn't disappear." She studied his face, noting the conflict there. "You've been so kind to me, Victor. More than I ever expected. I don't want to hurt you." His voice was quiet but firm. "Clara, you don't owe me anything. I made a business deal that turned into something else. But I can't hold you here against your will. If you choose to leave, I'll do everything in my power to ensure you and the baby are provided for." A tear slipped down her cheek. She reached out hesitantly, placing her hand over his. "You deserve the truth. Even if Leo hadn't come back, I think I would have stayed. Not because of our agreement, but because you've shown me a different side of yourself. Kindness, respect, genuine care. It's something I never expected." He swallowed, the muscles in his throat working. "I never intended to feel anything beyond responsibility. But you've made me question everything, Clara." His hand closed around hers gently. "I don't want you to stay out of obligation. I want you to stay because you want to." She inhaled a shaky breath. "I need to see Leo one more time, to hear his side, to see if he's truly changed." Victor's hand tightened involuntarily, but he nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'll support it." Arrangements were made for Leo to come to the mansion, this time as an invited guest rather than an intruder. The morning of his visit, Clara felt sick with nerves. She paced her suite, heart racing, hand drifting protectively to her small but noticeable baby bump. Finally, a staff member knocked gently, announcing Leo's arrival. Clara made her way to a sunroom where large windows let in a flood of natural light. She'd asked Victor to give them privacy, and he'd reluctantly agreed, waiting elsewhere in the house. Leo stood as she entered, his face pale. She noticed he looked thinner, dark circles under his eyes betraying many sleepless nights. "Clara," he breathed, stepping forward. She folded her arms, an unconscious move to shield herself and the baby. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you for letting me." They sank onto a sofa. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Leo began, voice trembling. "I know I have no right to ask your forgiveness, but please just hear me out." She nodded, her gaze steady. "Go on." He exhaled shakily. "I panicked. The debts, the bakery, it felt like we were drowning. When Victor offered that deal, all I could think about was escaping the crushing weight of poverty. I never considered the emotional cost for you, for me, for us. And now, I see what a fool I was." Clara's throat tightened. "It wasn't just about the money, was it? You wanted freedom from your burdens, and you saw me as expendable." Her words, raw and honest, struck him. He hung his head. "I was selfish. I won't deny it. Once I got the money, I lost myself in gambling and parties, trying to bury the guilt. But it only made everything worse. I've hit rock bottom now, Clara, and it made me realize what truly matters." She wiped at her eyes. "And what is that?" He hesitated, reaching tentatively for her hand. She allowed it, though her body tensed. "You," he whispered. "You and the child. Our child. I want to be there for you. For the baby. I want to make things right, however I can." Tears welled up, and Clara gently pulled her hand away. "Leo, do you understand how deeply you hurt me? You betrayed my trust in the worst way imaginable. I was terrified, alone. I never thought you'd do something like this. And now there's Victor." Her voice caught on his name. "He's been here for me. He stepped up in ways you never did." Leo flinched. "I know, and I hate that I failed you. But if you just give me another chance, I'll spend every day proving I've changed." Clara's heart pounded, tears coursing down her cheeks. She closed her eyes, recalling the good times they shared, the warmth of their early love, the laughter that once filled their tiny apartment, but also the raw betrayal, the anguish of discovering he had sold her trust and dignity. When she opened her eyes, her gaze was firm, resolute. "Leo, I can't go back to how things were. There's too much damage. Maybe one day we can find a way to co-parent, if that's what we decide. But I can't be your wife anymore." She saw his shoulders slump, a quiet sob escaping his lips. He cupped his face in his hands, trembling. For a moment, she felt a surge of pity. Then she reminded herself that pity couldn't erase the betrayal. "Clara," he choked out, voice muffled. "Don't leave me. I need you. We built a life together. I can do better, I promise." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "The life we had is gone. I'm not the same person, and neither are you. I want what's best for our child, and I'm not convinced that's living with a man who sold me to save himself." His devastated expression tore at her, but she knew she couldn't waver. Rising, she placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and she meant it. Summoning a staff member, she instructed them to escort Leo out. He looked at her one last time, tears streaming down his face, before following the staffer down the corridor. The sound of the front door closing reverberated through the empty hallway, echoing in Clara's chest. She remained standing there, shoulders shaking, tears staining her cheeks. After a moment, she felt a familiar presence. Victor had appeared in the doorway, worry etched on his features. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She turned, saw the concern in his eyes, and collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, gently rubbing her back as she poured out every last tear. The sorrow, the guilt, the relief, the lingering love and heartbreak for a past that was now irreversibly lost. Eventually, her sobs subsided. She pulled back, gazing up at Victor through puffy eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. There's so much." He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead, a gesture brimming with quiet compassion. "I know, and I'm here." At that moment, Clara made her final choice. She wouldn't return to Leo. The betrayal was too great, and her heart had shifted in ways she couldn't fully articulate. She would stay with Victor, forging a new life, one shaped not by desperation or transactions, but by a bond that had grown unexpectedly amidst the ruins of her old world. Months passed, and the seasons changed. The mansion's gardens burst into color, matching the sense of renewal in Clara's life. As her pregnancy advanced, she found herself creating a daily routine. Morning walks along the garden paths, prenatal yoga guided by a private instructor, afternoons practicing piano or reading, and evenings spent with Victor discussing names for the baby. Their relationship deepened with each passing week. Victor was endlessly patient, offering a steady presence that soothed Clara's anxieties. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, his face lighting up whenever he heard the baby's heartbeat on the monitor. The staff, once formal and distant, now greeted Clara with warmth, celebrating each milestone of her pregnancy as though she were truly part of the family. Word reached them that Leo had left the city after their final conversation. Clara felt a pang of sorrow for him, hoping he might find a way to rebuild his life. Yet she knew her own path no longer aligned with his. One crisp morning, as autumn leaves began to fall, Clara went into labor. Victor rushed her to the private hospital, hands shaking as he helped her into a wheelchair. Hours passed in a blur of pain and anticipation. When the baby finally arrived, a beautiful baby girl, Clara's heart swelled with indescribable love. Victor stood by her side, tears gathering in his eyes as he gazed upon the newborn. The nurse placed the baby in Clara's arms, and Clara felt an instantaneous bond that transcended every hardship she'd endured. "Hello, sweet girl," she whispered, marveling at the tiny hands and button nose. The baby let out a soft cry, and Clara's eyes misted with gratitude and overwhelming emotion. She glanced up at Victor, whose face was alight with wonder. He reached out gingerly, his fingertip brushing the baby's cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered, voice thick with awe. Clara nodded, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. The road she traveled was paved with betrayal and heartache, but in this moment, she felt a radiant hope. Her daughter's presence reminded her that even out of darkness, something beautiful could be born. In the weeks that followed, the mansion transformed from a solemn estate into a home buzzing with the soft sounds of a newborn. Clara spent her nights in a nursery adjoining her suite, rocking her daughter to sleep. Victor was never far, often waking at odd hours to check on them, ready with bottles and lullabies. Though not the child's biological father, he poured his heart into every aspect of caring for her. One evening, Clara settled the baby into a cradle, humming a lullaby. She stepped into the hallway to find Victor waiting. Together, they walked to a small sitting room overlooking the moonlit gardens. Clara sank onto a sofa, exhausted but glowing with the fulfillment of motherhood. Victor joined her, offering a gentle smile. "You're doing an amazing job with her. She's lucky to have you." Clara smiled softly. "And she's lucky to have you too." A comfortable silence fell between them. Then Victor took a slow breath, turning to face her more fully. "Clara, I've been waiting for the right time to bring this up," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Our arrangement, technically, it was for 1 year. That time is almost up." She nodded, her heart twisting at the reminder. They had come so far from the transactional nature of their beginning. "I know," she whispered. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I don't want it to end. Not like that. You and your daughter. You've given me something I never thought I'd have again. A reason to care, to hope." He paused, voice low with sincerity. "Stay. Not because of a contract or a deal, but because I love you." Emotion welled in Clara's chest. She gazed at Victor, recalling the quiet man who had once treated her with distant formality. Now, his eyes shone with genuine devotion. The memory of her old life with Leo flashed momentarily in her mind, but it no longer held the same pull. She had found a new life, one built on mutual respect and heartfelt connection. Gently, she placed her free hand over his. "I love you too," she said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "And I want to stay with you, with our daughter, for as long as we can have each other." Tears glistened in Victor's eyes as he pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. In that tender moment, the mansion's walls seemed to sigh in relief, as though even they recognized that something profound had shifted. No longer traded like an object, Clara now stood as the queen of her own destiny, shaping a life with the man who had unexpectedly become her rock and her heart's shelter. Clara's baby grew into a lively toddler, filling the mansion with laughter and endless discoveries. Some evenings, Clara would sit at the piano, her daughter perched on her lap, pressing random keys and giggling while Victor looked on with pride. Though she never forgot the pain of Leo's betrayal, Clara found a sense of forgiveness in her heart, not to excuse what he did, but to release herself from the bitterness that once consumed her. She heard whispers that he'd found work in another city, trying to atone for his mistakes. She prayed he would find peace, just as she had found solace in the most unlikely place. Walking the garden paths with Victor by her side, Clara often thought of how drastically her life had changed in 1 short year. From a desperate wife traded for money, she became a woman cherished and respected. From a cramped apartment filled with financial woes, she found herself in a home brimming with warmth and support. And there, in the hush of the twilight, with the sun dipping behind the horizon, Clara would look at Victor, feeling the tiny hand of her child nestled in hers, and know that she had finally chosen the life and the love she truly deserved. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button